Hi, Jamie with Inward Growth Counseling. And today I want to talk with you um, more about things that people deal with during the holidays. And specifically, I really want to dig into a little bit of noticing what we might call maladaptive behaviors and really kind of deconstruct and look at why do we do some of the maladaptive behaviors that we do. Um, and so specifically, I want to use an example of having guests or family over. And so we've talked about the ABCs, the A, which is that activating event, B, which is that belief, and then C, the consequence. And so we're going to go through that ABC model really quickly. So let's say that there you are and you have family come over, and Aunt Marge starts to criticize the sweet potatoes. And as Aunt Marge criticizes the sweet potatoes, well, you notice something. And what you notice is that you have some guilt about it. But you also notice that not only do you have some guilt, but you have some anxiety. And you feel really badly that you didn't live up to Aunt Marge's expectation. And so then, as we go through that model, so there's Aunt Marge criticizing the sweet potatoes, and then you have those feelings. Now, those behaviors, sometimes there's the behavior that we have right away, and then sometimes maybe there's the behavior that sneaks in later. And the one that I want to talk about is actually unhealthy eating or eating from guilt. And, I think that people deal with that and suffer from that quite a bit. And when we look at that maladaptive behavior, it can be incredibly destructive for people. And it can be destructive not just as it relates to their relationships with other people, but really can be really impactful for their physical well-being. And so, when we look at guilt or eating from feeling guilty or anxious, the impact can be significant. So then we really want to look and say, okay, what is the demand that we're making? What is that B, that irrational belief? And I'm going to contend that many times there is a should or a must in there. In fact, as a REBT therapist, we hold that most all of what we deal with has to do with that belief. And so that belief might be something like a demand, but it might also be some type of self-downing and really a damning statement about ourselves, such as, I must live up to Aunt Marge's expectations. And when we don't, sometimes the actions that come out of that, those consequences that lead from that are overeating. And so how do we go about challenging that, getting that we're not bad or worthless just because we didn't live up to Aunt Marge's expectations? Well, the question is, really, truly, is it true that just because the sweet potatoes aren't up to her expectations, that somehow you don't live up to her expectations? And I would contend that that's not true. All she said was, these sweet potatoes don't taste very good this year, or whatever that comment is. And then we make up that belief that somehow we should be better in some way, shape, or form, when really it's just about the sweet potatoes. And here's the question: are you a sweet potato? No, you're not. And so we're not the food that we make. And so there you are, really taking actions that have nothing to do with what was actually said. And so when we think about coming up with a more rational or helpful or accepting belief, we get into really looking and saying, well, it's unfortunate that Aunt Marge doesn't like the potatoes, but it's not awful. In fact, I really like my sweet potato, and the rest of the people around the table actually really like them. In fact, there were none left. So is it really truly that they were horrible? And is it really truly that I'm horrible for having made them? And I would contend that no. And so then they're looking and saying, okay, so when that happens, what might be the emotion that would come from that? Like, what's the goal for my emotion? Well, my goal might be some disappointment. It might be some concern for my relationship with Aunt Marge, if that's really what it is, but it, probably not. And then there's looking and saying, what would I do when I have those feelings? Well, if I have disappointment, maybe I should go out for a walk and step away and take a little break. So over the holidays, it becomes really easy to, I think, eat from guilt, eat from anxiety or fear or shame. And yet at the same time, there's really looking and saying, what are those shoulds and musts that I have about myself or about others or about family? And are they really true? Is it really true that that's the way things are? And if I have an empty container from where my sweet potatoes once were, I would say there's no real evidence that the sweet potatoes were bad. And maybe Aunt Marge just needed some kaopectate. So, hope that your holidays are great. Take some time to go for a walk or do things to take care of yourselves. And if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to subscribe and like my channel. Thanks.